Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have, oh my God, I just realized I forgot. Is it Kira or
Kira.
Kira? I'm so sorry. I was like, I,
All
I,
good.
I did that. I think I mispronounced your name a few days ago on stream when I was talking about upcoming episodes.
It's okay.
Realized that I did it, and then my brain short circuited and did that thing where I was like, oh no, the right
Don't
word,
do
the
the
wrong.
thing.
So all right, we're off to a what I would call a an audacious start here. I'm killing it already out of the gate. Welcome to the show. I'm so sorry.
No problem. You know what? I'm super not precious about it because it's very counterintuitive. So I'm all
Okay.
good with it. Don't you even worry. Yeah.
Okay, so me butchering your name aside, for folks, I'm very excited to meet you and to have you on the show. We've talked a couple times now. I am very impressed by the body of work you've put together, by the way you've kind of presented things. So I'm super excited to have you here. For folks who aren't familiar with your work, do you want to give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I run a company called Pencil and Paper. So we focus on enterprise user experience exclusively. So all the complex UX stuff. So it's kind of like, I don't know, UX on steroids sometimes. And so I sort of came to the UX world through science originally. So kind of bringing an interesting lens to some of the work that we do. Um, and I think that's kind of a quick summary of myself, anyways.
I have
Not
a
much more to
follow-up
say.
question. So you
Yeah,
you
yeah,
came to
sure.
UX through science. In my head, I just pictured you like in a lab coat with a beaker and some like glowing green chemical, and then you were like, you know what, this could look better, and you just pivoted, right? So I imagine that's not how it happened. So
Not
what
quite.
branch of science did you come
Not quite. Yeah.
from?
Well, I mean, the fact that I sucked so bad in the lab, like so bad. Like I remember sitting there with one of my lab partners at one point and we're supposed to like do this dilution and it was supposed to be really straightforward. We took past the whole lab time and we still didn't have it and the lab tech was like, "Oh, fine, just whatever." At the end. And I was like, "So I don't think this part of science is really going to work for me." Um, so I was in biology. So I think the kind of thread there that kind of brings it together is just the systems sort of perspective.
Yeah.
Because all of the really technical sort of like chem and stuff like that is like not going to fly. I'm a little bit too like,
You
so.
know, I was having this conversation with my partner yesterday where we were watching there's a lot of producers on YouTube who show their like
Mm,
musical creation process. And so they've got something like Ableton or Logic open and they're walking through their layers and all the knobs they're tweaking. And
yeah.
she was like, this looks like Figma. And you know, so yeah, in Ableton you've got all these layers of sound and
Mm,
processing, and then in Figma you've got all these layers of designs and effects, and then in code you've got layers of code, and it's really
mm,
interesting to me how all of these kind of organizational principles that we have are way more universal than they might feel like when you're in a
absolutely.
specialization. So did you find that that was the case, like your education in science, you know, how much of it overlapped when you moved into UI and UX?
Yeah, super good question. So I think with the science education piece of things, it's like you really learn how to think
Mm,
around a lot of detail. And then when you get into the more advanced like courses later on, you start to connect like the chemistry stuff and the cell biology stuff and the, you
hmm.
know, and so to me, the like learning how to think, learning how to logic through that work was like the exact same as design.
You
Yeah.
just articulated, I think, maybe the best argument for why a college education is worth considering. Because a lot of times you hear people talk
Mm-hmm.
about college educations in the context of, I didn't learn the skill any faster, any better than I would have learned that skill on my own. And that part is generally true. You can learn a skill through
Yeah.
college, you can learn a skill on your own, but learning how to think and learning how to apply logical processes is not something that most people will take the time to learn outside of school.
Yeah, and it's so and pushing your brain like that is so uncomfortable and
Mm,
it like hurts, you know?
yeah,
And so like being self-directed enough to make yourself do that is wild. I think
it's so
0% of the population could do
I
that.
I am one of the people who like read all of those kind of college, because I didn't go to college, right? So I read a lot of those books that were like challenge your perspective, be able to take the opposite position and argue against yourself and understand,
Mm,
like all those sorts of how to think, how to apply logic, and I don't have a full education on it, and I feel like I'm learning stuff all the time. But
mm,
it's I don't have like I have business books that I've bought, or like self-help books or self-improvement books, human psychology books. I have a stack of
mm.
them. Get like half a chapter, I'm like, nah, I can't do this anymore. I feel like when I was in my 20s, I had the energy. It was like people who can take cold showers, right? Like there are people out there who can force themselves every day to take a cold shower. They're like, yeah, it makes me feel great. And I look at a cold shower and I'm like, no, I'm getting back in bed. I don't care if I hurt.
Yeah,
I'll take
man.
the joint pain.
100%. Bring it on. Bring on the joint pain. That's wild to do that. Cold showers. Oh my God.
Yeah, not for me. Okay, so I have started getting a little maybe too far off topic here, but yeah, learning how to think, I think, is a really interesting foundation to build this off of. Um,
Mm,
so when you made the pivot into UI and UX, and you ultimately ended up with pencil and paper, I guess what are some of the foundations here? Because I think what makes UI and UX overwhelming to a lot of folks is that when I look at a design, so much
mhm.
of what's in that design feels like it is. I am a designer. I sat down and I looked at a blank piece of paper and I said, let me create something beautiful. And me, as a non designer, I'm looking at that same thing going, I don't know, like, beauty is such a subjective thing. How can I create something beautiful? Um, so I've seen enough of your work to know that you would argue that it's not just like beauty. There is a lot of like regimented and scientific approach here. So how do you, I guess, approach that with people, getting over that initial fear that like, oh, design is magic and you can't do
Mhm.
design unless you're good at design.
Yeah, totally. Like there's a weird connection that people have between design and creativity and having to be an artist or
Mm.
something. But like because it's in such a logical world, it's just not like that. Like we're not coming with the razzle dazzle that like only we can ever do.
The
Um,
razzle dazzle, jazz
like
hands.
just yeah, totally. Like it's not it, and people are just weird about like thinking of themselves as creative or not. So it's
Mm.
like even though literally like everyone is creative, you just have to loosen your definition a little bit. Um, but I one thing that really drew me to UX in the first place was that basically the appeal of it was that
Mm.
I don't have to be this like perfect person that just knows the answers because I'm just blessed, right?
Hmm.
It was the fact that if you are really up against a really tough problem to solve, you actually have others, users, that can basically give you enough clues for you to figure it out.
I like that inversion. I like that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not up to you. Like if you apply the process, you'll get an answer.
yeah. As a quick aside, I'm seeing in the chat, Frechtons likes cold showers, so it's all right. So there are dozens of us, dozens. Okay. Also, Eco, this hat came from a random gift shop on the Oregon coast. I don't even remember the name of it. I just walked in and needed a hat. But yeah, so
Nice.
okay, let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna do today, because so we're kind of framing this from the perspective of, right, I'm a developer. I work on the front end of my app. I'm implementing things, and I'm going to see a lot of UIs, and a lot of UIs are if you really break down what the vast majority of the internet is, it's like 95% forms and 5% hero boxes, right? That's basically the internet. And so when I'm working through these common elements, I'm looking at form controls, I'm looking at different user flows through sections of the app. I might have this instinct that something's not quite as good as it could be, but I don't have the tools to articulate that. And what I think you're doing well is you're providing us with a toolkit as developers to look at these things and say, I now have the right language. Oh, welcome, Brian and friends. Good to see you. Thanks for rating. We're talking about UI UX today. But so you're providing us with a toolkit and with the language to take that instinct that like, I feel like this could be better, and actually articulate what could be better. How do you go about doing that? I guess how did you end up in this space where you're kind of communicating design across that boundary?
Yeah, I think so. Like I've worked across a lot of projects with a lot of teams, lots of like product team type groups, and noticed that we get stuck as a group and we get stuck as individuals. And there's a bunch of things like within the design like way of doing things that get you out of that. Like they can kind of interrupt that feeling that you have of like, what do I do next? Or just be like, we've argued about this modal 27 times. This person thinks this is bad. This other person thinks something else is bad. And it's like, it's not actually that mysterious. And I just felt like it was important to kind of make this stuff a little bit more accessible and a little bit more concrete, because we don't want to be like, I really don't want to be operating in a world where it's like, well, we're the magic people that have all the knowledge. So I wanted to like open it up a little bit, because everyone that's working on this stuff is smart.
Yeah.
You know, we all have a logical base in our minds of how to work through problems and stuff like that. And I think that it's actually, if we can apply just a few prompts and like a couple of practices, then you get a lot of the way there. You don't have to have, it's not necessarily like follow these 5 steps. You'll find this at step 1, you'll find this at step 2, but it gives you enough to bounce off of yourself. That's kind of the approach that I'd like to take with it.
I like that. And I feel like what's interesting about what you're saying too is that it's breaking things down into a sort of like foundational principles that aren't subjective. And I think about this like cooking. Cooking is very subjective. I like some flavors, I don't like other flavors. But when you get down below the surface of cooking, it's a very like principled way of doing things. If you boil water, it will do certain things to certain ingredients. And if you put something in an oven or a broiler or in a saute pan, different things happen, different reactions happen. And so those things remain true. And the subjective part comes when you start combining those objectively true things. And I think that, design in my experience is that, someone needs to be able to see a button and identify it as a button. Now, subjectively, you can make some decisions about what makes a button identifiable and interactive looking. Maybe you go skeuomorphic, maybe you go flat, maybe whatever. But at the end of the day, it's still that one principle. If someone has to do something on a page, they need to know what it is that they click to do the thing. So I like that you're kind of taking it from that principled standpoint of like, hey, if you want to make it boring, you can make it boring. This can be science. It can be a checklist. Because I think a lot of people want to make design scary and creative, like, I have to have a blank canvas and throw paint and know all this magic stuff. You can make it boring if you want. You can make it a thing that you just make sure is right before you ship it.
Yeah, and you can get a large like part of the way there just with that. Like assuming we're not talking about like innovation and the tech space of doing things people have never done before. It's like most of the stuff that we do, there's a pattern, there's a way, there is a way to do it that will be easier for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. To go back to that cooking example, you can be a chef. You have to study hard to be a chef. There are a million skills that you need to be a chef. But if you just want to cook a meal that tastes good at home, you don't have to study cooking. You can just learn a few principles and you're going to get it right. You're going to have a great meal.
Totally, totally. You just, yeah, or just learn a couple recipes.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Keep on doing.
Okay, so I'm really excited about this. I feel like there are a million things that we can potentially cover, but it might be easier to just start looking at things. So let me switch us over into the desktop sharing mode, and I will start by giving a quick shout out to our captioner. We've got Rachel here with us today from White Coat Captioning, who is doing what you're seeing on the screen here, doing live captioning on the show. That's on the homepage of the site for anybody who wants to follow along. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, Fauna, and Auth0, all of whom are kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people, which I very much appreciate. If you want to follow Kira on Twitter, you can do that. Head over there and click that follow button. And Pencil and Paper is the company, so you can go check that out. And that's as far as I've gotten. I'm now completely in your hands. What's the first thing that we should do here?
Okay, so let's, so I've kind of got like 2 overall steps to kind of a diagnosis process. So we could maybe chat through what those are.
Yeah.
And then crack into some examples and see how could we improve either like the interaction or the UI using that. Yeah, nice. Cool. Okay, so maybe I'll just talk through quickly like step 1. So I'm assuming you are working on something and you're like, oh man, what's wrong with this? I don't quite know. It just feels like compared to what I thought it was going to feel like. So this is usually like a feeling where you're stuck. You don't really know what to do next, and you've been like right in the weeds for a little too long. Is this familiar to you?
Oh yeah, this is every design project. This is every project of any sort that I've ever taken on. You look at it too long, it stops making sense. You know, you've done that thing where you've looked at the same word in 1,000 fonts, and now that word doesn't seem like a word anymore. Yeah.
So step 1, step away from the computer. So that's what I would say is like a good step when you're using the most high fidelity tools that you have, code, whatever, Figma. You just can't get any distance or perspective. So my first step is kind of like if you can switch to just your notebook or maybe a scratch pad kind of thing. Taking a moment to just reflect on what are you building? What is the scope of it? And what were your goals when you started building this thing? So sometimes what I'll sort of describe is like, if you were going to talk to a friend, you know, a buddy of yours, and you're like, hey, this thing is weird. Can I just bounce it off of you? What are the things that you would describe to them?
I have, so I'm gonna borrow a term from the programming world here and talk about rubber ducks. 1 second. Okay, so when you have a problem, you explain it to the duck, right?
Oh.
And so this is a joke that I've heard a bunch of programmers tell, and this is a long road that led to me getting into the rubber duck business. This is the Corgi duck, which you can buy at lwj.dev/store. But this little rubber duck here is specifically designed so that when you're having a coding problem, you can say, okay, listen to this. It was supposed to do this, but when I started doing this, this, and this, it didn't work. And then you go, oh wait, I forgot to do that. And that's the idea, is right, is that you as you verbalize it, you have to simplify.
Yeah. Totally. You have to simplify, and then you start to articulate your own logic, and then you see where you went into fairyland, where you just started thinking weird and doing things in kind of a bizarre way. So, I mean, that's kind of a step 1, I think, that would apply to like if you're working even on like a little feature on a page, or you're working on like a whole flow, you can kind of have a reflection exercise. It's very like it's sort of a little bit like woo designery thing to do, but I think that I know a lot of people. I know a lot of devs that are like, yeah, just let me crack into this, and then they get right into the code sort of immediately because
Mm-hmm.
that's the main material that you usually use to make stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's just like it's just hard to follow the track of your logic if you don't like sort of note it down. But you
Yeah.
can do it retrospectively, and it's really useful, I think, too.
I I love, so I tend to do it almost as like this cycle, right? Where I'll start by, in a notebook, I just write a bulleted list of what needs to be true. And then I'll start building it, and then when it stops making sense, I'll like go to my whiteboard and I make a flow chart. And then when I get back, I'm like,
Yeah,
then I'm working on like a specific element and I can't get it to do what I want. So then I'm like trying to draw it like paper prototypey kind of thing. And then but like moving between these different methods of working on a thing based on like, am I trying to solve a practical problem, like I need pixels on the screen, or an abstract problem, like I don't know how to think about this thing?
absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That I mean, I'm sure you save yourself like hundreds of hours a year because of doing that switch. Like, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that makes me more efficient, and I have 1,000 ways to make myself less efficient. It all balances out in the end.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. It's a process. You figure it out over time, and
Yeah,
you're like, hey, this reminds me of the time I was also confused. What did I do at that time?
for sure. Yeah.
um, okay, so anyways, so once you do that, you can figure out basically if there's any huge flaws in your logic, and maybe that's
Mm,
enough. Um, and that's enough to go on to kind of get unblocked. But then you can also kind of zero in on more specific areas within your experience that you want to fix. Um,
yeah.
if you could pop over to the Figma if you want, because I have a visual sort of thing for the in the examples tab.
Yeah. So okay, so here's the examples tab. Should I like play the prototype? You did all these cool things in your demo where you like really made this amazing. Um, I feel like there's a whole body of work that I would love to dig into just around making cool Figma prototypes because this is extremely cool.
Oh yeah, we're so obsessed with Figma prototyping nowadays because it's like you can just do such cool stuff and
Absolutely.
and just use it as like a fluid communication tool. That's kind of like what people are doing now. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty sweet. But if you pop over to zeroing in on issues, so this is kind of like a subset of things. But there's some standards that you can apply to some really big things. So the first one that I like to focus on is nav.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so navigation, this is a really good kind of like sanity check moment for any experience because if people don't know where they are, they don't know anything of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like think about the last time you were like in a city that you didn't know. Now you're like,
Yeah.
ah, you don't know how to do anything. You're
Mm-hmm.
disoriented, right? So, so if you can kind of go through your screen or screens and ask yourself a couple of these questions, it can help you to identify if there's any stinkies in there.
Any
Um,
stinkies?
yeah. So to borrow a developer term, code smells. We're always talking about design smells at PNP because it's the same vibe. So like, where did if you can look at that specific screen and you can say, okay, where did I come from to land on this page in this state
Mm-hmm.
of this page? Where are all the places that I can come from to get here? So that's a bit of you're kind of doing a mapping there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, what are all the paths that it took to get here? Sometimes that could like unravel some weirdness. Is there like a nested menu, like a secondary menu? Is there any breadcrumbs? Are all of your breadcrumbs relevant? Why are you showing them? Would just anyone understand them? Is
Mm-hmm.
it Is it totally straightforward? It's kind of what I would say.
Yeah. And this is something that like, it's really important to get feedback here, because what I found is that as I'm working on an app, I start to develop my own vocabulary, my own set of like contextual understandings of how things work together and what things are. Like I was reading a description of an app yesterday where everything was a code word. Like they had metaphors for everything, and I bet those metaphors were amazing. But the description that they gave was like, I'm going to use nonsense words to not out the company, but they were like, you take the ducks and then you invest those into your watches, and then those become trees which bloom into, it was like, okay, each one of those things is probably a really powerful technical concept, but I have literally no idea what you're talking about. Like you could have said any number of words and I would have been like, uh-huh.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that kind of brings me to the next block here, which is around, if you just scroll a little, information architecture.
Information architecture.
Yeah. So this and language. This is totally tied to navigation, but I wanted to like really separate it because you need to, like, what I would suggest is, especially if stuff's getting really weird within your, like a full product, for example, or something, you want to do an audit of the words that you use. So, yeah.
I've been making arguments that a lot of different problems at work could be solved by starting with a meeting that defines a glossary.
Oh my God.
Like yes. I've been in so many meetings where we fought for an hour because we were both saying the same thing with different definitions of, like, what I was saying one word and you were saying a different word, and we both meant the same thing, but we like I can't tell you how many meetings I've seen completely derail because somebody was saying we should be agile and somebody else was saying we should do short amounts of work and then review our work, and violently disagreeing on whether or not one or the other was the right approach.
Yep, I totally had that exact moment yesterday. We were looking at a design backlog and we're like, okay, because in design work, you're always calling things like a dashboard and a homepage and a thing like that. And we're like, oh yeah, that thing is like done. There's only a loose end or two to kind of tie up. And so we went through the whole meeting. That's the assumption. At the end of it, we're like, oh, you meant this other feature set that we just started a concept on. Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. Like and we had a good lull, but like, yeah, it was pretty hilarious because it happens all the time. Like, oh man, but it would be awkward to start every meeting with like, so what's the glossary for today?
I know, but it's one of those things that, like, and back in the context of like information architecture and language, I have to assume that somebody's going to land on miscellaneous pages in my site. Not everybody's going to go to the home page and then follow the onboarding and then get to they're going to show up in the middle of the docs because they Googled something. And if the docs start off with a sentence like, here's all of our jargon in one sentence, it's like, oh my goodness.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. You can't make any assumptions, especially on the web. Like you can't imagine that anyone's learned anything by the time they come to your thing. So yeah, I would say, like, if you're going to really think about language, because sometimes, I mean, I think the hardest part of design is actually the language part. And so partially because, especially when we get into like complex software that has like AI in it and like whatever, these different data, like a complex data model and things like that, you basically have to make up a word for something that's abstract and then use that same word consistently across your error messages, your pages, your buttons, all of that stuff. And if you change it, change one of those words, it's like people are so confused. it's like if you've ever paid your taxes or anything
Right.
on online,
Hmm.
and that you have a paper form in front of you and they're asking you for an input, but the label is different from the paper form to the online form.
Oh my goodness, that yes. Like and you see this like this seems like it would be so obvious, but it happens all the time. Like I've logged into apps where they tell me to name my organization and then they reference it as a team and I have no idea if that's the same thing because I've also been in apps where you create an organization and then you make sub teams. And now I don't know because there was never like
Mhm.
a clear delineation and there's never a mention of the org again. Am I using the same concept or am I using another concept? And it leads to huge messes. When I was at IBM,
Totally.
for example, inconsistency of language led to having to maintain some really gnarly legacy code because people had built their entire business around a misunderstanding of what a feature was for based on the language.
Wow.
And it would have cost us so much to either lose that customer or
Mm.
manually upgrade their setup for them that it was like, okay, it's cheaper to just like hire 5 full-time engineers who maintain a fork of our code to keep that running.
Whoa.
It's wild how much this
That's
can
crazy.
impact business.
Totally. And like we have the opportunity to be, a lot of people are going to be working on new stuff, the stuff
Hmm.
that's relatively new in its life cycle. It's not like 10 years old, things like that. Like if we can catch these kind of design debt things
Hmm.
early on, then we won't, then we can save ourselves for later.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's such a like a little big thing. Like it never feels like it's
Mhm.
that important at the time, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, I see why this matters.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, yeah. Like I've worked on certain teams where there's like a willy-nilly, like, oh yeah, we'll just change this button of this
Hmm.
verb, whatever. We call it a run, running the process everywhere else, but let's call it like initiate here or something
Oh,
like that.
jeez.
And it is a synonym, but it's scary, like
Hmm.
people, it's you need to gauge how much people can kind of handle in like a high stakes situation when you
Absolutely.
work through this stuff. Be extra sensitive. You
Yeah,
can.
I mean it's such a I like it when you see people who really like deeply understand this too because a lot of times the first name that something gets kind of wears a groove into somebody's head and then they want to call it that forever. And so you'll see a company with a really odd name for something and it's just because that was like the first person who designed it called it that. The product completely evolved from the original idea, but the name stuck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember when Sarah Jasner was my manager, she knew this, and so she would intentionally name projects things like Butts or Flubity, so that we would never ever ever publish the initial name for a thing. It was always very clear that the name was an actual project that we needed to do toward the end of the project. And
That's
I think that's
really
such a
smart.
smart thing to do.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's no one can get attached.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like I mean,
That's
you
like,
you can get attached and it'll always internally be codenamed butts, but you can't publicly put that into your UI, right? I mean, well, I guess you could. Like maybe
yeah,
that's how you differentiate in the market, but generally speaking, that's not how it's going to work. You're going to have the internal code name, but your code name doesn't leak because it's so nonsensical that everybody just kind of instinctively understands, "Oh yeah, this can't go public. That's not a public name."
yeah, yeah, totally. Like so off brand or
Yeah.
whatever. Just like never gonna work. Um, yeah, so I'd say like once you kind of have a sense for nav and language,
Mhm.
then you'll probably want to get a bit more specific too. So if you do a little scrolly scroll here, um, the next thing to look at would be visual hierarchy and UI. Um, so if you're looking at your interface, you can ask yourself some of these questions.
Mhm.
Um, so the most fundamental one is, are the most important things on the page visually the most important things on the page?
Mm-hmm.
So is that all matching? And then is there a consistent interaction color being used? That's another go-to. That can be really handy too. It's like just give the people the clue of like this one color. Sometimes it can be a good thing to rely on. Um, Visually, are things like really consistent? Are they super different? Are they so consistent they don't look different? Are they so differentiated they look so different that it's like, oh, am I on a total different section here or am I on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
Basically. So you can have
Yeah.
both problems.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I feel like this is a challenge where you have those sort of arguments with somebody where they're like, well, our homepage isn't just for one thing, and they're like, yeah, well, we have to emphasize this, and it's like, okay, great, and then you do it, and they're like, well, okay, but we also need to emphasize this because what about our enterprise customers? And they go, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, let's emphasize that, and they're like, oh, but we also need to emphasize this because we've got, like developers and non-developers who are our non-enterprise customers. Like, okay, well, now we've emphasized literally everything on the page. Like, do you think people are actually going to figure that out, or?
Yeah, man, totally. If you're in a room and literally everyone's yelling, you can't understand what anyone's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you've emphasized everything, you've emphasized nothing, right? That's a good way to look at it,
Yeah,
I think.
totally. And just because, I guess it's sort of the order of operations of learning that site or that
Mm,
page or whatever. Um, if you make things bigger, people will kind of learn those things first, and then they'll learn, the thing like they'll basically follow a path with their eyeball. And so, like, yeah, that subtle thing, like, um, about that specific interaction is important, but you don't need to actually know that
hmm.
until you're executing that interaction or
Yeah,
you're just about to or whatever.
yeah. That's a good point. So how I mean I guess we'll look at this when we get into the more practical examples, but kind of thinking about um, what do we do when we find ourselves in that situation? Yeah, like one of the for example, I'll tell you a tip that I got from a designer is to kind of squint at the design until everything goes blurry,
Oh,
right?
perfect.
And if you do
Mm-hmm.
that, it's like, okay, what's the thing that I see? And then open your eyes and look at it and go, is that actually the thing that I want people to see? Like, because that's the thing carrying the most visual weight, right? Do you have any other
Exactly.
little like tips and tricks like that we can use that'll help us identify these problems right away?
I mean, that's a classic. That one's really good. Again, with the sort of note of if you are actually really confused on what should be the most important things, like what the hierarchy should be, I'd suggest going and whiteboarding it, like numbering it out
Mm,
and being like, well, I need them to know that this page is about user management. I need them to know that they can add users. Then I need them to know who the users are. And then I need to know when you added that user, for
yeah,
example.
that's a really good point. And you bring up a good point because you're numbering, right? And I think that
Numbering.
numbering introduces a constraint, which is you can only have one thing per number. You can't have everything
Exactly.
tied for first place. Like something has to be
Yeah.
first place.
Something has to be first place. You can't, and like sometimes too, I think when I've got caught in this kind of like logic trap before where we are having this conversation of like, no, this also needs to be here, and this also needs to be here, and this, and you're kind of conflating like a little bit of real estate that you have that it has
Mm,
to do all this stuff. And sometimes you're doing that because you don't actually have a place for that thing to live.
yeah.
So it's an interesting one. You're like, no, we're not making a details page about blah blah blah.
But
So we just have
then,
to put everything here.
yeah.
Like it kind
Yes.
of so you can like make stuff really weird by just trying to jam everything into one spot. But especially with like a web experience, you want to flow through it. You just want enough to like know what that thing's about to maybe go into it or read more or whatever the case is.
Hmm. Absolutely. Like, I think that's a very good point. So yeah, let's see. So the interaction stuff, making sure that you know what's most important, 100%. Varying a lot. So this is, we actually saw this yesterday as kind of a prank. Somebody put up a slide where it was like 15 points that were kind of high level, big targets for next year. And each point, to troll the chat, they put in a different font. And and it got exactly the desired result. Everybody just started panicking. and I think that it's really the fact that we can use that sort of chaos as a prank that does cause that sort of emotional response is a good reminder that we shouldn't do it by mistake.
Totally. 100%. Yes. Everyone's freaking out. It's like, that's the evidence that we need to like take it down a notch with all the jazzy creativity sometimes.
And this is where like design systems come in really handy. Like, we just talked to like George Gomez about how to do that on the show. Was it earlier this week or was it last week? I've lost all concept of time. This episode here. So if you wanna look at design systems specifically, that's a good episode to go and do it with. But yeah, so what else do you want to focus on anything else here? Or I don't know how much further we're going.
So
I'm trying to be mindful of time because I'm definitely off on rabbit holes here.
Yeah, totally. That's all good. Yeah, I would say that just a little flag for when you're wondering about like, is this cool? Is this part of the UI cool? I would just do a quick check for like, did I implement anything bespoke just for this page?
Oh, okay.
That would be one quick check, because that's what we would do also with the design system. We'd be like, wait, why are we actually designing a new thing here? And if you can make the right argument for that new thing, then cool. But if you just were like, oh, I just did a thing and it's kind of weird, that might be, you maybe could have done some reusable stuff there.
Yeah. And being cognizant of, is it because you just wanted to, or is it because it actually solves a problem? That seems like a good question to ask anytime you're about to make something new. Like whether it's design, dev, you're going to remodel your house, like whatever it is. Like, am I making a change for the sake of change, or am I making a change because it solves a problem?
Exactly. Yeah. And like, and what level of like standard do you want to apply to it? Because sometimes you do have to do a Band-Aid solution, like a low self-esteem sort of like Band-Aid, and that's okay. But there's a time that's going to get phased out and it's going to get replaced with something or whatever. But if you can kind of just match those things. Like, this is an actual good decision. So cool. But so it should be judged by, also a higher standard.
For sure.
And then interaction, that's kind of the other final one that's important, and really interaction's really hard. So this one's important. So really I would do a bit of a mapping here of like what scenarios, like, are there any scenarios users go through that they can't get out of again? So any dead ends that you can kind of get into a weird state. When you look at the steps that the user needs to take to like execute this goal, is it more or less than you would think they should be? Would be my other question. Does the interaction map to a familiar UX pattern in any way? Can you tell, this one's a big one. Can you tell the state the system is in on the page? So like, did it succeed? Did it fail? Is it pending? Is it in progress? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Gotcha. Do you need to do this step so that you can do the next one? Like, all of those things. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like showing dependency, like in an onboarding flow, you've got 5 steps. You can't do step 5 without doing step 4. Exactly. Right. And if you don't show me that in the UI, then I'm really frustrated when I click on the 5 and nothing happens. Exactly. Totally. Gotcha. Good example. And then just like generally, are users driven forward in their workflow? Because sometimes you do get to a point where like, yeah, you had a success, But then you're just like on a page,
Mm-hmm.
you're sort of in the abyss a little bit. And sometimes that's a reasonable conclusion, but other times it's like, actually, it's kind of lame. Maybe there's something better we can do.
Sure. Yeah.
So those are like, oops, sorry,
Oh, sorry.
that doesn't go anywhere, that wrap up button.
Okay.
So anyway, so if you go back to the beginning, you can just press R on your keyboard if you want. Oh, or that.
Oh, really? That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I do need to have a Figma prototype session because I have no idea how any of this works.
Yeah, it's fun. So I have a couple of examples here, and we can kind of go through whichever one that you want, and then maybe we can fix it.
All right, you want to vote, chat? What do you want to see? We have about 40 minutes. So, oh, what's up, George? But yeah, we have about 40 minutes, so we're gonna have time for one, maybe two of these. So vote for the ones you want to see. Which ones will be most useful for you?
Yeah, so I'll just describe them quickly too to maybe give a little context. So the onboarding example is just like a small subset of a full onboarding flow. So it's just like enter your financial information. So it's just like a few screens. The UI example is like a pretty ugly UI that we can figure out how to fix.
Mm-hmm.
The error example is like just a really bad interaction for an error state. So we could look at how to like make that more good. And then we got a success example, which is like, okay, like the interaction's kind of meh.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But it could be awesome.
Well, we've got a couple votes in the chat for the error example. So why don't we start here?
Sweet. Nice.
All right.
All right.
So I'm looking at this. I see a page. It's got, let's see, we've got, okay, so this is the thing I like about, this is your clue. This is the thing that is interactive. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say, all right, I'm senior. I'm junior. Okay.
I'm junior. And then if you click out, it reverts.
Yeah, it broke. Okay. And so I'm expecting this to change, and it's not changing. And there's nothing supervision here.
So basically what's happening in the system is that action is not allowed because you don't have permission.
Ah, okay.
So this is what I would describe as a passive aggressive error interaction, where it's just like, no.
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it, and I'm going to ignore you. So yeah, do you have any initial thoughts on what would be nicer in this scenario?
So I have a few thoughts. Like my general questions looking at this are, if there's a thing that I as a user am able to interact with, I want to see it in an input. If I'm not able to interact with it, I kind of feel like I don't want it to be an input. Like maybe it should just be a list item that shows me what my level is, because I can't change that. Or maybe the input's disabled, or at the very least, if I try to change it, show me a pop-up or a like outline it in red and say like, you can't do that, you jabroni.
Yes.
So something like that,
Yeah, totally. So I definitely agree with you on that one. Like so you could have multiple scenarios. You could have that you can't even interact with this input at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could also have it where you just can't select that value. You're not allowed.
Just the one. Oh, so this is a potential, like I can select some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah, potentially.
Oh, okay. So that changes some of my feedback, right? Because and actually you just pointed out something good, which is I should have asked more questions before I started jumping right to solutions. Which is honestly, if I have one, like people joke about their toxic trait, that's my toxic trait. I start fixing before I have full understanding.
I think we all do. We all want to get it done, right? We're on sprints here. We're terrified. Um, yeah, totally. So I think like what you're touching on, I think is really interesting because you're, regardless of how we handle it, what you're talking about is actually prevention of
Mm-hmm.
the error in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming the system knows that this is not allowed at the time
Mm-hmm.
that this page is loaded and stuff, you'd want to prevent, like, as we work through creating a really good error interaction, that to me is like the ultimate. The error interaction doesn't even happen.
Right. But you bring up a good point because this could be data pulled from a third party system, and maybe that third party system will show me somebody's status in the options, but not permissions. So I have no way of knowing whether or not somebody's able to choose a certain option. All I can do is send it to the API and check what the response is. And so
Yeah.
in that case, I can't do it ahead of time because there's no way for me to know.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Another question I should have asked before I started designing solutions.
Well,
The silence speaks volumes.
well, it's just like so relatable. I've gotten myself into this scenario many times.
Oh, I
Being
love
like,
it so much.
hey, developer, can we actually know this thing? And they're like, not really.
I see
Oh,
you've
crap.
designed a solution. Would you like to check that with reality?
Yes, little cross reference would be good. So let's imagine, let's just say that, okay, we have to just show that, like, not allowed somehow. So we could maybe brainstorm some ways that we might want to do that
Yeah.
in here.
So should I go into the Figma
Yeah.
itself to do this?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
We can.
Let me see. It was error here. Here. Okay. So we've got
Yeah.
our bad thingy, and so my thinking is, should I like pull this out to a new frame or something so that I can mess with it?
Sure. Yeah, if you want. I have
Okay, I'm gonna-
other copies too, but yeah.
All right, I'm going to pull this down here so
Okay.
that we can start messing with it. So I want to
Yeah.
design the error state. And my thinking is like my gut instinct is make it red and add a little message right there, like right where you changed it. Or if I'm have to click the save button, maybe it goes, right near the save button so that it's contextually relevant to where I just clicked and where I'm looking. So I'm kind of thinking like maybe if something goes wrong, I can take this button here and maybe I make it red, and maybe we say, I'm not going to change that, but I am going to take this text and copy it down here and say, you can't edit that, you jabroni. And then we can make that red. I don't know if the
Yeah.
contrast might be working there. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, nice. Nice.
And then it makes me think like maybe we want the stroke to be a shade of this red, but like a lighter shade, so that it's clear that something is wrong.
Yes.
And like
yeah,
this
nice.
too, kind of that looks like an error to me, right? Like, hey, you can't change that.
Yes, nice. So I think you touched on a couple of really good points there, which is if you can localize the message of the error, that can be really useful because it's right, exactly as you're saying, it's like right where your eyeball already is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because
given
like
that
I could have put that up here, right? But like then I click the button and am I even looking over here? If there's no motion or something to draw my eye, I'll just miss it. And I've seen that happen. Like I have been the person who completely misses the error message, and then I'm mad, and then I'm getting on Twitter to yell, and then I read the page again. I go, oh, there was an error message.
You're taking the screenshot and you're like, oh, wait. Yeah, totally. So, this is so that the localized approach is really good. But what if this was longer? What if the form was longer and you actually, the focus wasn't there
So
for
like
that?
if let's say the error is here, but the form is so long that I'm down here, I can't see it, it's off screen. Okay, so maybe in that case, just gonna make a mess out here.
Yeah, do it.
Whoops. Take this one, and maybe that one lives like down here ish, and we could do something like uh-oh, where does that live?
Oh, there you go.
Maybe I make this one red, and then the text goes white. If I can do the, I'm trying to remember how. Whoops. No, go away. Fill. There. Something like this, which gives us the, like, this is hideous, but it kind of, it's down by where I did things, and kind of a general thing, and probably instead of a like a message like this, it would be, say, you don't have permission to edit the seniority level. And then I need to make,
Nice.
what do I do? This?
Oh, yeah,
Right?
nice. Yeah,
Yeah. So then we
totally.
have kind of a thingy.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really good, which is like what I was going to ask you next. The So with an error situation, you want to say what, right? You want to say, this, you can't do it. But like, don't even go there. So you want to like say that, but yeah, if you can then communicate system logic into that error, then you're going from basically a FYI into a richer and more informative kind of message.
So yeah, so we started with no information, and
Yeah.
then the next one, which is like something went wrong, is more helpful than nothing, but still not super helpful. And like,
Yeah.
my least favorite is when you fill out a multi-page form and then it says something's wrong with your input, and then you have to go
Yeah.
scroll back through the whole thing to figure out which thing is broken, and just hope that they marked it red, because if they didn't, then you got to read each input and just guess
Yeah.
which one didn't pass the formatter.
And it may not have communicated any criteria about what should go into those inputs.
Yeah. And
So
and
you're
so
like,
this then takes us to more of a like, we have now given some context. Like, a thing went wrong, and that thing is this.
and this thing, yes. So in the spirit of really kind of taking it full circle, is there anything else that we could do to help the user achieve their goal?
We could show them the available options, maybe? Like, you could choose this option or this option?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like in the input, for example, you could be like, stuff you can do, stuff you can't do.
Yeah.
That would
what
be
else?
super. Well, so when we were talking earlier about kind of flow and stuff like that, one of the questions was, does this propel the user forward?
Mm-hmm.
So we could potentially try to do that here. So for example, maybe the ultimate error message doesn't even happen in the first place. That's cool. But when we do have to have one, tells you what it is, tells you what the problem is, and maybe it could also tell you how to fix it.
Okay. So to do that, like, we just kind of expand our error message here, and we say, please choose A new option, or like what's your
Like an allowed value or something. I mean, that's probably bad UX writing because it's very computery. Um, choose.
yeah.
You could probably do two things. I mean, you could choose something that you're allowed to choose, or you could contact the admin of the thing to give you permission. I think those would probably be the two things that you could do there. Because this is magical world that we're making up right now.
Yeah.
So
So something like that.
something like
Also,
that.
showing off some coolness with Figma being multiplayer is always cool.
So cool. I love it. It's so handy to get around.
Absolutely.
Um,
So this is, and this is good. Like, and you know, there are a bunch of questions that we would need to figure out in terms of how we could make this actually happen. You know, am I able to get a list of the allowed options? Would that, would that let me do something helpful? Could I validate on the fly? Like when somebody chooses an option, could I show them the error right then instead of waiting until they get to the end of the form? Or better yet, what we talked about originally, just figure out what they're allowed to do and only let them edit the stuff they're allowed to edit. Don't create landmines for people, right? Like if you, like you said, we want to propel the user forward. Giving somebody a thing to trip over is not going to help you in that goal. And so if there's a disallowed option, get it out of there. Don't even show them it's a thing.
Totally. Yeah. Or, I mean, also getting into a really deeper way of kind of holistic way of thinking about it, we could also think about why do these permissions work this way in the first place? You know, maybe the most appropriate thing here would be actually change the permissions model or create an approval flow or something like that, where I do have the free reign over my stuff, but it does have an approval layer to it. So I can just do this stuff.
Yeah, because that's also interesting too, because in a lot of cases, like at scale, obviously adding a human review is probably not a great idea. Like you don't want 10,000 review requests every day to go to one poor person who is having like the biggest career crisis. Like, what have I done? But you know, there is a world where like I'm in some software as a service app, and each person on the team, we've got maybe 8 people on the team, and I'm the admin, and I do want to know if people are going to change what they have access to. And so rather than trying to make the computer smart enough to know, just email me and say, hey, so-and-so is requesting this permission, or so-and-so is trying to change their role to this, confirm or deny, you're the admin. And then the UX for the person requesting just changes to say, instead of saying saved, it says, requested or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, because now, and you know what just happened by asking that question, we got out of thinking about the program and started thinking about the people, which is, and I like that you were able to do that without asking me to think about the people. You just like asked a good question and we ended up there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting when you have the kind of the micro solutions, and then if you keep on applying that, like, is this really good? Is this interaction really good? Is this really informative? Is this really pushing you forward? And then
there is a trap here. And I say this because I've fallen into this trap. Where do you draw the line on that? Like, at what point do you stop asking that question before you go, are we really in the right business? Like, should I get out of the tech and start a farm? Like, what's the right level of,
I know.
How many layers of Galaxy Brain do we want to get to before we say, okay, this is as far as we want to go to get this project done? Or is that something that you just, it depends?
Totally. I mean, most of the time, you're not going to default to let's go start a farm, coffee shop or something, because there's a real business there. So that's where, like, I mean, with the design practice that I work within, usually it's like, we do kind of innovation tracks where you are like, let's go into fairyland, let's just like woo,
Mm,
go nuts on ideas and stuff like that. But most of the time the lens that I'm applying is like, is this an excellent interaction, and if not, can we get there? um, and the reason why I think that that is an interesting or relevant way to look at it is that like these SaaS products especially are getting so competitive. Like
mm-hmm.
if you look in at like the project management world for products right now, it is like really cutthroat in
Mm-hmm.
terms of they are coming out with crazy amounts of features and stuff like that. So I think that like maybe our overall standards for user experience are getting rising.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's definitely like a kind of creeping normalcy where you see somebody innovate in a certain way. I can't remember who made this comparison, but they were talking about like the iPhone. When the iPhone came out, it was revolutionary. No
mm,
buttons, touchscreen. Now, if you drop a phone with no buttons and a touchscreen, unless you're deliberately doing like a hey, are you somebody who hates touchscreens and wants physical buttons? It's kind of wild. Like you'd be like, wait, why doesn't this phone do phone things? You know? And because
totally.
we just moved the goalposts, like something pushed forward what we were expecting. And I think that SaaS apps are probably one of the most competitive spaces here because you see like Stripe drops a payment form and it's so much easier to use than most payment forms out there. And now the goalpost just moved. If you're not as easy to use as Stripe,
Yeah.
you're losing. You're not average anymore. You're now bad.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It's like it's pretty wild, and it's even getting applied to industries that have like historically been pretty like don't know how to use a computer,
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting huge leap I feel like is happening right now.
Yeah.
Um like we see even in like our redesign projects, for example, like they're super enterprisey. Maybe the thing's been around for 10 years and you're doing an overhaul, but
Mm-hmm.
like the standard is going from like a 90s standard to like a 2030 standard. I
Right.
feel like
Yeah.
in that moment.
I mean, it definitely feels like, and we're seeing that in, you mentioned spaces that aren't historically techy, but like, it feels like, fintech products are getting pretty aggressive with their UX. And I didn't feel
Yeah,
like my bank site was easy to use 4 years ago. It was like super confusing. And now today they're all dropping these really flashy UIs and it actually is kind of nice to use. You can do a bank transfer in one click versus printing out a form and faxing it to somebody. It's like, dang, we caught up. But the
totally.
goalpost moved
Yeah.
again. So now even with all those changes, you're still like, oh, this isn't as easy to use as Betterment, whatever, whatever the one that has the flashiest UI right now.
Totally. Yeah, fintech's a really good example. It's like it's getting aggressive
Mm-hmm.
because their differentiator is like, oh, can you do payments or whatever? Like, yeah, like all of them can if
Mm-hmm.
it. And so the nice to use, really easy to adopt, not scary. Those things are becoming like such key differentiators. It's wild.
Absolutely. Um, okay, so we have like maybe 15-ish minutes left. Do you think we have time to do one more of these examples?
Yeah, I think we could probably fit the confirmation feedback one
Yeah,
in.
which let's see here. So
So if you
the
pop over to your other tab on the right, go back into the prototype mode,
prototype.
like in your
Ah,
browser. Yeah. Um,
press R.
press R.
Amazing. And
And
this one?
then, yeah, pop down. So
Okay.
this scenario here is basically you're on this list view and you're going to upload 3 files to this project.
Okay. I've selected my 3 files. I choose.
And then that
Chat,
was your,
did y'all just see Figma animate a toast?
yeah.
I did not know that that could happen.
Oh, it can happen.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. That's
Very
amazing.
special. I feel like we're on a Figma ad right now.
I swear there's some tools that every time I use them, I'm just like,
Yeah.
Hot damn.
Oh,
What a
I
great
know.
tool.
I know. I know. It's really life affirming.
Figma,
um,
come sponsor this show because we're clearly sponsoring you here.
yeah, come on. Give us a
um,
discount or something.
no, this is wonderful. Like it okay. So anyways, Figma is great. This success was okay, but the three toasts, like a couple things that it kind of jump out at me as weird. I did one
Okay.
action and I got 3 success dialogues. That feels weird. Um, which implies to me that there's a world in which 2 of the files would upload and one of them wouldn't, which is also confusing. And I think if I look back here, uh, just running that one more time, it doesn't tell me which files uploaded. So if one of them failed, I have no idea which one it was, and I'd have to go open the thing up and look at the files to see which one was gone. So there's a lot of like mystery meat going on in this success. Because I
Nice.
would have treated it like one transaction in my head. I have 3 files. Please upload them. Great. I have uploaded them. Success. Instead of like, I took the first one, done. Took the second one, done. Right? It's kind of the computer's violating my expectations here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really interesting what you just communicated in terms of the logic that all of that implies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's worth like taking a moment on it because like one thing you said was I'm not sure if like one uploaded or multiple like or like some failed or could fail. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like these are the kinds of things that people are running through in their head and
Mm-hmm.
then they're like weirded out and can't always articulate how they're weirded out by it, which I think is really interesting. Um,
I
and
will
then you
say
also,
I have
mm,
significantly fewer ideas on how to fix this one. Like the error message one, I felt pretty comfortable with that one. I don't know how to fix this one.
mm.
So what would you
So
recommend? Or I guess let me go. Do I go in here
yeah, yeah, hop back
and
over there.
where should I like? Should I go to this one? Do you think?
Yeah, maybe go to one of them where the toasts are active,
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
you
go
can
to
kind of like
I'm gonna go to
look at
this
that.
one because I'm gonna make an educated guess here that we are going to get rid of the multiple toasts and have a single one. Okay, all right.
Sounds
So
good.
so here we are, and we've completed our task. Right. I also just noticed it is doing separate things because you increment to 5 and then to 6 and then to 7 and that makes my little programmer heart very sad. I want a transaction real bad there.
Like just to get the whole thing through, not
Yeah,
to
it either
like
succeeds or it
queuing them.
fails, right? Like it should tell me, hey, one of your files was too big, you need to shrink it and then try this group of uploads again or something like that. Or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
do it like Google Docs where when you drag 3 files in it pops up a thing and shows me the progress of each file with like a check mark for each one. So if one fails, I'm like, "Oh, that file didn't work. What's the reason?" Like just anything that tells me what the heck
Hmm.
is going on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a super good point. And this, I would say too, like one thing that we always want to do with the feedback in an interface is make sure that it actually matches like the importance of what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
So here, I mean, a file was uploaded, a file was uploaded, a file was uploaded. It's like, whoa, mama, like this should be pretty standard, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like we're doing confetti or anything crazy here, but it is kind of it's a lot of feedback that doesn't actually tell you much that
Mm,
uh, is a bit much, kind of.
gotcha.
Um, and then you're also kind of touching on, in terms of our different solutions, I would say for the toast, aggregating that information
Mm-hmm.
is a great idea. Um, but like, what kind of information do you think you would want to put in that toast?
I so I guess thinking about what I'm doing here, I'm looking at some kind of project and I want to attach something to it. So I want the computer to know enough about what I just did for me to feel
Mm,
confident that it was actually done. So if it shows me like three file names and checkboxes next to each file name, or it shows me, successfully uploaded file name, file name, file name, or like some indication that it actually knows what the files were and wasn't just like the form and then after a timeout you show me a success and we have no idea if it worked. Not that I've ever built that. But but like, those sorts of things where it's very clear that the app is not just telling you that it worked, but confirming, like showing you evidence that the thing worked.
Exactly. That's such a good word to use, evidence. You know, it's like people say, "Oh, I did this thing," and whatever. You're like, but like, give me some more details. You
Mm-hmm.
know, did you though? So I think that's super useful. What you're saying around that that logic that people or that question that people go through, the questioning. Like, if you actually did it, tell me what you actually did,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the same kind of principle applies that we put into the error, right? Was like, don't just say like a thing happened. Tell me what the thing was that happened.
So we can say something like, if I can spell, successfully uploaded three files. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
at a bare minimum, this is better. At least I know what happened.
Yeah,
Right? Like
yeah,
it shows me clearly that the thing did what I expected the thing to do.
yeah.
Um,
So I would say we could even take this a little bit further,
mhm.
because this UI is disembodied from where the thing happened. So where did you successfully upload these three files? Maybe I'm doing batching of this. Maybe I just did like 15 and they're all taking
Ah,
different amounts of time.
okay. So what if I do like, ta-da, make this oh no.
Sorry, everything's grouped.
Let's see if I can do this without breaking it. Yes, I can. Okay, perfect. So then I can take this. Maybe I just put this right down here, and then
Sorry,
what's
there's
the?
auto layout.
Oh,
It's
cool.
kicking
Okay,
in.
okay. I get it. I understand. Let me pull this out of the frame, and then we just drop that thing right in here,
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
So I
Yeah,
mean, that could probably use some like actual design love, but at least it shows me what's going on in the place where I did it.
exactly. Yeah, so like we could um, kind of hit on 2 points with this solution. And then, if there were lots of use cases where things were getting batched or they were happening on multiple parts of the screen at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, then there's probably a good use case for having something like at the top or something fixed or something like that that just tells you what's up
Mm-hmm.
um, across the whole page. But we can just assume for this one, like that's not so much thing.
Sure.
Um, and so we hit that. It's nice to have that localized feedback. It's a little bit more detailed
Yeah,
in
I would
there.
agree.
Yeah, so we
Um,
definitely zhuzh it
there's a
a
question in the
little bit,
chat.
but
This
yeah,
episode is not going to feature any coding. We do have a ton of episodes, most of which I think at this point are featuring coding. But today we are learning how to think about design, which is pretty critical as we're coding. So yeah, I like. I mean, this is. I think I would probably want someone who is a professional designer to go in and make this look a little more cohesive because it is kind of floating. We've got some things like drop shadows that are popping it up above. And like, yeah, I guess if I just turn this off, can I just turn this off? Ta-da, get out of here, you. Yeah.
yes.
Wait, oh no,
Let's
what have I
see.
done? Is it down on the banner? There it is. I'm just going to pop, get out of here. So that kind of drops it in a little bit and makes it feel like it's at least sort of part of this thing. But it now feels like part of the element. And so I click, I upload. The thing that I changed shows me that something worked and happened, and it has some information that indicates it knows what the thing was that happened. This would make me more confident than the toast, toast, toast. Is there
Nice.
anything that you
Yeah.
would do in addition to this, or like other things that you would like if you were going to be the one redesigning this?
I would also consider just in terms of, so whenever we take like a really localized approach to conveying like the feedback,
Hmm.
it's great. But I need to do the kind of check with the dev crew to see that we would actually be like maintaining focus in that part of the screen.
Mm.
And
Because if it
then
pops back up to the top and then this gets lost.
then that yeah, then that would suck.
Gotcha.
And then it's like all that front end effort would be kind of um, not always going to work. So
Hmm.
you'd still get into that scenario where the user could still be like, so did it work
And
at all?
so you're bringing up a couple good things here. First, as developers, we should be asking these questions. We shouldn't jump straight to solutions. We should start thinking about, what information am I trying to convey? Why is this on the screen? What does it accomplish? And then as designers, the same thing. You should be asking your developers, is this thing that I'm thinking of possible? Like, how does the system work and what's actually going to be available to do? Because if, as I started designing that error message, I was making assumptions about the system. And in designing this contextual success message, we're making assumptions about the system. And if we don't validate those, then we might end up in that scenario where we send a design over and the dev team goes, that's not possible. Like, we can't do it that way. So it's a collaboration, right?
Absolutely. 100%. It's such a collaboration. It's kind of like a bit of one of my beefs in our kind of tech world is that we don't really explore and talk about our workflow between design and
Mm,
dev. Like we should, my idea around this is like we should really be talking about this as co-creators of a thing,
mm-hmm.
because that's what we're doing and that's what like really great teams are doing. And I think that there's a lot that we can kind of develop in terms of our workflow together,
Absolutely.
to make this awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've checked that this is going to show up, that we're not going to lose it on the UI. Is there anything else that you would do in this case, or do you feel like this is the right amount of like simplicity and contextual approach?
Yeah, so I do some exploration of exactly how long to run that feedback for in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, because it will probably fade away unless it needs any feedback needs to like fade away between at a certain point. I'd look at different like UI ways to do it. And then I would check on the kind of focus question that I talked about. And then if all of those things are figured out, then the feedback should be really robust
Mm-hmm.
overall. So I think that check, check, check. If all those things are done, then you have a really excellent success interaction.
Nice. Well, this
Yeah.
is great. So with this, I think that's about all we're going to have time to do today. So let's talk a little bit about what somebody can do if they want to learn more. So for somebody who's watching today, or somebody who starts watching in the future, what would you suggest as next steps for somebody who wants to dig in and start building this set of instincts and skills for themselves?
Nice. Yeah. So we actually developed a course called Design SOS, specifically for developers. And we'll see if it shows up. It's kind of a new one. Anyways, you can get it. You can get the link from the Pencil and Paper site. And basically, we go through all of these examples and talk through how to make the design better, how to think about things differently, and how to give you kind of the tools that you need to do a bunch of this stuff on your own. So if you just look at the main nav, we have a labs choice.
Labs. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we should fix that. So this is all the info on the course here. And if you're interested, you can get involved with that. But we're also doing like really super hardcore deep dive articles on specific UX patterns. So if you want to look through our different articles and check those out and kind of nerd out on that stuff.
Oh yeah, ahead. Just straight up pattern analysis. So these are the sorts of things that, like, if you're a developer, you might look at something like this and go, this probably isn't for me. I guarantee you that when you look at this, you will recognize things that you do every day in these types of pattern analysis articles. Design dev collaboration, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we actually had a startup founder reach out. We have a data tables one as well. And he was like, redesigned my data tables off of this article tonight, and they're done. And here's a screenshot. I was like, oh my God. So, when you're diving deep into solving some of these problems, that this kind of thing can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, is this a...
Yeah.
Oh, that is cool. This is such a good idea. Okay. All right. Everybody go to the site and click through all the articles so that you can see before and after comparisons. That is worth the price of admission right there. What a great way to show this stuff, because I always want to see comparisons and I never open I have one open over here and one open over here and I'm like thumbing back and forth trying to figure out. This is perfect. This is so good.
It hits you right in the eyeballs.
Right in the eyeballs.
Yeah. So we're going to release 3 more of these and launch a masterclass series on them in Q1.
Very cool.
Early in the new year. So keep your eyeballs peeled for those.
So probably, I'm going to guess somewhere at the bottom, there's going to be a how to get more. Oh my goodness. There's so much information in here. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just drop your email in here, y'all, so that you get notified when new things come out. But this is super, super helpful. I feel like, and we just scratched the surface. Like, look at all of the material that's in here, and that's just on like the one page. So much information in here that we didn't have a chance to really dig into. So yeah, this can be a rabbit hole, but I do think this is one of those things where, there's knowing nothing, and you struggle a lot because you don't know what you don't know. And then there's kind of getting over that initial hump to recognize there are a lot of things that you are aware could be better. You don't need to know how exactly to fix them. That's what professional designers are for. But as a developer, if you can pull that out and say, hey, I'm noticing this interaction problem here, or I'm noticing this pattern is a little bit confusing. I don't know how to fix it, but I'd love to talk through it with you, designer. And you can make such a big impact on the quality of the things you build by just even developing that part of your brain that goes, ting, something's not right. Right? And you don't have to do a ton of work to become that good, right?
So true. Plus times 1 million trillion.
Okay, so Kira, at this point, are there any parting words or final links that you want to send people to? I'm going to start dropping a few in the chat while you think and talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really covered it in terms of like sort of links and things like that. I think that really, I think that a lot of this stuff is a lot more accessible than it kind of seems. Like we have all these like cute UIs and Behance and Dribbble and stuff like that. And it seems sort of like really fancy. But a lot of this stuff is just an extension of the logic that you're already using in development. It's just a slightly different lens to kind of apply at different times. So I think that this stuff is really doable, and you can get far into it. You can go a long way without knowing a whole bunch and being a total specialist. So
I think that's
words of encouragement.
good advice all around. All right, chat, I think we're going to call this one. So stay tuned. We're going to find somebody to raid. Before we leave, though, let's do another shout out to our live captioning. We have had Rachel here with us all day from White Coat Captioning, taking all these words down. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, Fauna, and Auth0, all of whom are kicking in to make this show more accessible. While you're on the show site, make sure you go take a look at the schedule. You can click this Add on Google Calendar button to have the shows automatically added to your calendar. It doesn't notify you or anything, just puts them there so you can see when they're happening. You can always follow on Twitch, hit that little bell button so that you see when things are happening. And maybe just tune in next week. We are going to have Max Stoiber on the show to talk about GraphCDN. We're going to do some GraphQL stuff. We've got Shadid coming in to talk about Next.js and Fauna. We've got Harshil talking about N8N. We've got so many good things, and there are more being added all the time. So make sure you head over, get on the schedule, and keep track of that. So we're gonna go raid. It looks like Alex Trust is streaming. So let's head over there. Thank you, Kira, so much for spending some time with us today. Chat, as always, thanks for hanging out. We will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.